Hey, so, um, hi, I'm Hannah, 29, and I spend my days building software, kind of creating worlds out of code, but honestly, for most of my life, my own plans and ambitions have always taken a back seat to my family's demands. And, well, one dinner changed everything. It was the kind of night that made me realize maybe it's time to define myself, not just serve their story. Oh, and before we dive in, drop a comment where are you watching from and what time is it there. Growing up, my family home didn't really feel like a home at all. I mean, yeah, there were couches and a kitchen and all that, but honestly, it was more like a workplace. And I was the only permanent employee, unpaid, of course. My parents, Luke and Vanessa, they were masters of appearances. To anyone else, they looked perfect, like they had it all together. Dad, a financial advisor with a constant, confident smile, and Mom, a real estate agent who could sell. Not just houses, but this whole perfect lifestyle. And me, I was just part of the machinery that kept their perfect world running. See, they had these two very different roles for their daughters. My younger sister, Thea, she was the star, beautiful, charming, and effortlessly popular. At 24, she was a self-styled social media influencer. That meant she spent her days posing with products, taking stylized photos, and basically being the face of everything my parents wanted the world to see. She was their pride, their living, breathing trophy. Every tiny accomplishment of hers, getting a brand deal, a like milestone, even something as small as a compliment on a post was celebrated with lavish dinners and enthusiastic praise. Her follower account constantly discussed, like it was some kind of stock market index we all needed to track. And then there was me, the stagehand, the background crew, the one making sure the lights stayed on and the props were all in place. Utility was my role. From early on, if the Wi-Fi went out, it was, Hannah, fix the internet. If Mom needed a last-minute presentation for a property, Hannah, you're good with computers, whip something up. If Dad couldn't figure out some software at his firm, I was on call tech support. I was also the family chauffeur, grocery shopper, cook for every holiday, listener to endless complaints from Mom about clients, and a willing ear for Thea freaking out over a dozen lost followers. And what did I get in return? Polite nods. Maybe a smile, but never real acknowledgement. When I graduated with my computer science degree, my parents threw a small barbecue. Thea, meanwhile, had landed a promotional deal with some boutique. And, well, suddenly my graduation certificate was covered by potato salad on a side table. My work, my projects, my efforts, they were invisible to them. They called it playing on the computer. And sure, I made money, real money. But to them, it was just this weird little hobby. Funny enough, that money often ended up covering Thea's car payments or Mom's shopping sprees. And yeah, those loans never repaid. And when I gently bring it up, Mom would wave her hand dismissively. Hannah, it's family. We don't keep tabs. But oh, they kept tabs on every failure to measure up to their impossible standards. I wasn't socially graceful enough like Thea. I didn't wear the latest fashions. I preferred a quiet evening with a book over loud parties. Sure, I was a functional cog, but I wasn't the sparkling ornament they could show off. And that wasn't even said out loud most of the time. No, it came through in 1,000 tiny ways. The glazed over eyes when I excitedly explained a project. The interruptions to ask Thea something trivial. the volunteering of my time and skills without ever asking. Oh, Hannah can do it was basically the unofficial family motto. My life, my ambitions, my dreams, they didn't matter. And yet, I had things going on. I was building a reputation as a reliable, innovative developer. I had friends, hobbies, ambitions. I dreamed of starting my own company, of creating something truly mine. But in that house, my ambitions felt flimsy, distant, almost laughable. My dreams were treated like quirky hobbies to be indulged until I found a husband to provide for me. A goal Mom frequently reminded me of. One incident sticks out more than most. It was a few years ago. On their anniversary, they threw this massive party, inviting clients and neighbors. Thea's role: look pretty and mingle, mine help caterers, manage the bar, clean up. Mom handed me a massive list of chores design invitations. Manage our SVPs online, create a photo slideshow, fix flickering garden lights, weeks of prep, hours of work, all sacrificed from my own deadlines. The night came, and I was running around like crazy, refilling glasses and clearing plates. One of Dad's colleagues stopped me, saying, "The catering staff is doing a wonderful job." Before I could respond, Mom swooped in, hand perfectly manicured on his arm, laughing. "Oh, this is just our Hannah. She's such a helper." And that's it. I wasn't their daughter. Not really. I was invisible, the help, the girl keeping the beautiful life intact. I gave a hollow smile and went back to collecting glasses. It was just another day in the life of being the family servant. All of this, though, it shaped me. It taught me patience, problem solving, multitasking, but it also taught me that my worth, as far as my family was concerned, was measured in usefulness, not talent, not creativity, not dreams. Usefulness. That invisible role followed me everywhere. I became someone who could anticipate needs, execute tasks, and vanish into the background. My achievements were dismissed, my failures amplified, and my presence barely acknowledged. It's hard to explain how constant that feeling is until you live it. Every conversation, every family event, every casual request from Mom or Dad reminded me you exist to serve, not to shine. And I carried that quietly, every day. It made me feel invisible, yes, but it also made me incredibly resilient. I learned to function, to perform without praise, to keep moving even when the world I was in didn't see me. And all the while, Thea was celebrated, adored, and placed on a pedestal that seemed impossibly high. And honestly, sometimes I hated it, sometimes I resented it, and sometimes I just accepted it. But in all that, there was also this quiet, burning part of me that refused to vanish entirely. I had skills, ideas, a mind that was sharp and capable. But in that house, being the background crew was safer. Being invisible was easier. It was a role I played perfectly, though it cost me pieces of myself. And yet, those tiny, overlooked moments, the little ways I solved problems, fixed issues, and quietly supported everyone around me, built a foundation I didn't even realize I was constructing. A foundation for a life that, eventually, I would claim as my own. It was a Tuesday evening, and I had just crawled off a marathon client call with someone in a completely different time zone. My brain was buzzing with lines of code, deadlines, and client demands, and all I wanted was a bowl of cereal and to collapse into bed. But then my phone lit up, Mom. I sighed before even picking it up. already knowing this wouldn't be a quick, casual check-in. I pressed the call button and braced myself for the usual tension. "Hannah, thank goodness you answered." Her voice came tight and urgent, the kind of urgency that always felt artificially constructed. "I need you. Your father and I are in a bit of a crisis." I leaned my head against the cool kitchen wall, trying to keep my patience. "What's wrong?" I asked, though I could already guess the type of crisis it was. She dropped her voice into a conspiratorial whisper. "We've just secured a dinner with a very, very important man. Kevin Vance. He's a huge deal, an investment mogul. Your father has been trying to get a meeting with him for months, and he's finally agreed to come to the house next Saturday." I could feel the knot in my stomach tightening. Kevin Vance. That name alone was enough to set my pulse racing, but not in a good way. I already knew where this was going. "Okay, that's great for Dad," I said cautiously. No, it's great for all of us," she corrected, her voice sharp now, emphasizing the word all. "If your father can land him as a client, it would be a massive coup. We have to make the perfect impression. The house has to be immaculate. The food has to be 5-star. Everything has to be flawless." I waited. I didn't even need to guess what was coming next. "So, here's the plan." She rushed on without a pause, like she hadn't even noticed my silence. "I'll handle the decor. Thea will be our charming hostess. We need you to handle the food. Not just cooking. I mean the whole menu: appetizers, main course, dessert, the works. Something impressive. I'll send you some ideas." I straightened, a cold knot forming in my stomach. I could practically see the hours of planning, shopping, and preparation stretching out in front of me, days away from my own deadlines. "Mom, I can't. Next week is impossible for me. I have a major project deadline. I'll be working around the clock, including the weekend." The line went silent. And I mean really silent. The kind of silence that presses in on you, heavy and cold. When she finally spoke again, her voice was laced with disappointment, cutting and sharp. "Hannah, I'm not asking you to climb a mountain. I'm asking you to make dinner for your family. This is important. For your father's career." I tried to reason with her. "I understand that, but I have a career too. My clients are counting on me. I can't just drop everything." A sharp, humorless laugh crackled over the phone. "Don't be so dramatic. Your little computer job can wait. You sit in your room and type. This is a real, tangible opportunity for the family, for Thea's future, for our security. You have to see the bigger picture." The phrase, "your little computer job," hit me like a slap. My years of hard work, the late nights, the stress of running my own freelance business, it all amounted to nothing in her eyes. Just a hobby that kept me from my true duty serving them. "It's not a little job," I said, my voice trembling slightly with anger I was trying to hold back. "It's my livelihood, and I'm telling you, I don't have the time." Then Dad's voice boomed through the speaker, and I hadn't even realized he joined the call. "Your mother is right," he said, almost like a drumbeat of inevitability. "This isn't just a dinner, it's a strategic move. Kevin Vance could change everything for us. We need you to step up. We're not asking for much." Not asking for much. Really, they were asking me to sacrifice my professional commitments, to pour time and energy into their scheme, to play the same invisible role I'd been doing for years. I could feel the weight of it, the expectation pressing down on me. They weren't asking, they were demanding my life, my career, my time. They saw it as resources to be deployed at their convenience. I tried one last desperate attempt at reason. "Why can't you hire a caterer?" I asked, my voice tight, the frustration spilling out. Mom scoffed, the sound dripping with condescension. "A caterer? Don't be ridiculous. It's impersonal. A home-cooked meal shows care. It shows family values. That's the image we need to present. Besides, why would we pay a stranger a fortune when we have you, when we have me?" The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't a person with dreams, with responsibilities, with a career I had worked years to build. I was an asset, an in-house free service provider. I felt a strange mix of terror and liberation at once. I wanted to scream, but I also felt something else bubbling up inside me. Control, ownership of myself. "I'm sorry," I said, the words leaving my mouth and sounding both terrifying and freeing. "I can't do it." The fallout was immediate. Mom accused me of being selfish and ungrateful. Dad said I was letting the family down. They brought up everything they'd ever done for me, framing their parental duties as debts I now refused to repay. Mom's voice dripped with venom as she said, "Fine, we'll handle it ourselves, but don't come crying when you realize who your family is. Some people just don't understand loyalty." And then she hung up. I stood in my dark kitchen, the phone pressed to my ear, shaking with a mix of rage and grief. Years of being reduced to a helper, a technician, a silent background presence, all boiled down to this one phone call. For the first time, it wasn't just another day of being invisible. It was a line drawn in the sand. Their casual disregard for my career, for my life outside their whims, had finally gone too far. My parents made it perfectly clear my only value was in my service to them. And for the first time, I realized I had to stop. I had to refuse not just this dinner, but the dynamic that had defined my life for so long. The decision solidified in my mind like concrete. I would no longer be their servant, their invisible helper. I turned off my phone, ignoring the inevitable guilt-tripping texts that would come. For once, their drama was just background noise. It no longer had power over me. It's funny, in a dark, twisted way, how liberating a refusal can feel. All the anger and frustration I'd been holding in, all those years of being overlooked, suddenly gave me clarity. I wasn't a person who had to comply with every demand, who had to give up her own life and career for the sake of appearances. I was someone who could say no, and saying no was the first real step in reclaiming my life. That night, after the phone call, I buried myself in my work, my little computer job, the one they'd dismissed, became my sanctuary. I poured every ounce of frustration, hurt, and determination into the project I'd been working on, a complex software solution for a logistics company. Deadlines loomed, but for the first time, they felt like challenges I was embracing for myself, not for anyone else. When I delivered the project, the client was thrilled, giving me glowing praise and a handsome bonus. Every bit of acknowledgement felt like a small victory, a reminder that my skills and effort had value, even if my parents had refused to see it. And it hit me. In that quiet, victorious moment, this was what life could be like if I prioritized myself. I realized I didn't have to live according to their definitions. Their version of me, the invisible, dutiful helper, was not who I had to be. The rage that had tightened in my chest during that call had transformed into something more powerful: resolve. I could build a life on my own terms. I could finally stop reacting to their demands and start living for myself. After that night, I didn't waste a single second sulking or replaying the argument in my head. Well, maybe for a minute, but then I dove headfirst into my work. My little freelance business, the one they had dismissed as a hobby, became my sanctuary, my proving ground. I had a complex project for a logistics company that I'd been juggling alongside all the chaos at home, and suddenly it was the center of my focus. Every line of code I wrote felt like reclaiming a bit of myself. Each bug I squashed, each feature I implemented, was a quiet act of defiance, a reminder that my skills mattered even if they couldn't see it. The hours I poured into that project weren't just about delivering quality work, they were about control. For once, there were no distractions, no demands from people who didn't respect my time or my efforts. I could make decisions, set my own pace, and shape outcomes entirely on my own terms. And there's this amazing thing that happens when you really focus. The work doesn't just get done, it grows. My clients started noticing, giving glowing feedback, sharing my work with colleagues, and before I knew it, more projects started coming in. Not just any projects, but interesting ones, challenging ones, the kind that made me excited to wake up and code. It was during this period that the idea I'd been quietly thinking about for years began to take shape. I'd always imagined creating a platform that could simplify project management for freelancers and small tech teams. Something that would handle communication, invoicing, and file sharing all in one place. But before, there had always been this excuse. This invisible hand of my family pulling me away from my dreams, making them feel secondary. Now, nothing was in my way. I started sketching the user interface late at night, brainstorming workflows, mapping out the business plan. It was thrilling to see an idea I'd held in my head finally manifesting in the real world. The first prototype was messy, sure, but it worked. And more importantly, it worked because I had poured not just my technical skills into it, but my experiences, my frustrations, and my insights from years of freelance work. Every obstacle I'd faced: miscommunication with clients, confusing file management, delayed payments, became a feature to solve for in this new platform. I called it Innovate Solutions. The name felt right, forward-looking, positive, like a clean slate. From there, everything accelerated. I moved out of my small apartment into a slightly larger one with a spare room I converted into an office. I hired my first employee, a young coder I met at a tech conference who was just as passionate about creating useful tools as I was. Then another, and another. Within a couple of years, Innovate Solutions had outgrown my bedroom office and moved into a small downtown space. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, entirely. The control, the ownership, the proof that I could build something of real value. Every small milestone was empowering. The days were long, caffeine-fueled, and intense. I worked nights, weekends, holidays sometimes. But it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like freedom. Freedom to make choices, to shape my path, to see results that reflected my own effort. And with each success, my confidence grew. I started attending conferences, networking with other tech professionals who didn't see me as the background girl, but as a peer, as someone with ideas worth listening to. It was a revelation being surrounded by people who understood my language, my skills, and my drive, who didn't belittle my work or dismiss my achievements. Investing in myself became a priority. I signed up for online courses in business management, marketing, leadership. I read everything I could get my hands on about startups, scaling a business, negotiating deals. I wasn't just coding anymore. I was thinking strategically, planning growth, positioning my company in a competitive market. Every choice I made, every hour I spent learning was a brick in the foundation of the independent life I was constructing. And then came the small victories that made the late nights and endless work feel worthwhile. My first significant client referral came from a recommendation by someone who'd seen my work. The first glowing testimonial that I could post on my site. The first time a client asked to retain my services for a long-term project, rather than a single contract. Each of these moments built momentum. Each one a reminder that my life didn't have to revolve around anyone else's approval. I was creating something real, something that mattered. On my terms. It was during one particularly late night, after debugging a stubborn piece of code, that it clicked not just the program finally running perfectly, but a metaphor for my own life. One decision, one firm boundary, had shifted the trajectory of everything. I had said no to being invisible, and now, slowly but surely, I was becoming someone whose presence was noticed, whose ideas had weight, whose work carried impact. The growth of Innovate Solutions also brought new challenges, but these were challenges I was excited to tackle. I learned to delegate, to trust my team, to make tough calls about direction and priorities. It was empowering to see others rely on me, to feel that responsibility as a weight I wanted to carry, not one imposed on me without consent. I was no longer reacting to others. I was acting, leading, and creating. Financially, things improved too. I invested in the company, in equipment, in software, and in marketing, but I also invested in myself. Conferences, courses, mentorships, every dollar spent felt purposeful. Every hour of effort had a tangible return, whether in skills, knowledge, or business growth. And it was thrilling to realize that unlike before, these returns weren't being siphoned off to pay for someone else's lifestyle. This time, the effort and rewards were mine. By the end of that first year, I had a solid prototype, a small but growing client base, and a team that shared my vision. The sense of accomplishment was unlike anything I'd felt before. No parental nods, no side glances of approval, just real, measurable results that reflected my intelligence, creativity, and persistence. For the first time, I wasn't defined by what I did for others. I was defined by what I built for myself. And, that was only the beginning. Each project, each client, each milestone pushed me further away from the person I had been, the invisible helper, the dutiful daughter, the background character in my own life. The work I was doing wasn't just building software. It was building my own identity, my independence, and my confidence. The lessons from those long, stressful, seemingly thankless years at home weren't wasted. They had prepared me to handle pressure, manage multiple responsibilities, and think critically under stress. Every step of building Innovate Solutions, from the messy early prototypes to securing my first round of seed funding, was a statement. It was proof that I could succeed without anyone else validating me. My parents' dismissals, their constant demands, their failure to see my worth, they were irrelevant to the life I was actively creating. I realized that, for the first time, my success wasn't something I needed to hide behind excuses or quietly justify. It existed, real and undeniable, because of my choices, not theirs. And with that realization came a sense of freedom I hadn't known I could feel. The anger and frustration from that phone call transformed into drive, focus, and clarity. Each line of code, each business decision, each conversation with clients or team members became an affirmation that I was in charge. I wasn't reacting to anyone's expectations or whims. I was steering the ship. Innovate Solutions was my vessel, my strategy, my creation, and I was at the helm, fully aware of my own power, capability, and direction. It had been months since I'd really interacted with my family beyond the occasional polite check-ins. I had mostly kept them at arm's length, careful not to reveal too much about Innovate Solutions or the strides I'd been making. And then, out of the blue, my mother started reaching out again. At first, it was those teary voicemails, the little notes about missing me. Casual lunch invitations that seemed harmless, but something about her tone, the way she phrased things, made me pause. I had learned to read between the lines. There was always an agenda hidden behind the sweetness. And sure enough, the day came when I realized the truth. I had stopped by their house, dropping off a small birthday gift for my father. It was the first time I'd been inside in over 2 years. I walked in quietly, and there was Mom, on the phone in the kitchen, her back turned to me. She was speaking in this low, excited whisper, clearly thinking I couldn't hear a word. "No, everything is set for Saturday," she said. I froze in the hallway, clutching the gift bag tighter, my knuckles turning white. Then it hit me. Kevin Vance. The same name from that infamous call years ago. My stomach twisted. I pressed closer to hear more. Vanessa continued. "Luke has been working on this for ages. Kevin Vance is notoriously private, but Luke managed to get an introduction through a golf buddy. This dinner has to be perfect." Every word she spoke confirmed it. They weren't missing me. They weren't trying to reconnect out of genuine care. They were preparing for a performance, and this time, I was meant to be part of the set. My heart raced, but oddly, I felt calm too. Years of practice had sharpened my ability to assess situations quickly. I realized immediately that I wasn't being invited back for affection. I was being recast as a prop, a quiet, beautiful daughter to complete the image they wanted to project. For a wealthy potential client. I waited until the call ended, watching her hang up, and then I stepped into the kitchen with a bright, practiced smile. "Hi, Mom. Just dropping this off for Dad," I said casually. She jumped but quickly recovered, her expression smoothing into her signature cheerful facade. I placed the gift on the counter, letting my posture and voice convey a sense of calm. "Sounds like you have big plans for Saturday," I added, lightly. Her eyes lit up immediately, and I could see the relief wash over her face. "Oh, we do. Your father is hosting a very important business associate for dinner. His name is Kevin Vance, a wonderful man. We'd love for you to be there, just a quiet family dinner." I kept my expression neutral, letting just the tiniest upward curve of my lips suggest compliance. "Yes, I would be there. But this wasn't about being compliant. It was about strategy. As I listened to her chatter, detailing plans for dress code, decor, and my role in the kitchen, a part of me was amused. Years ago, these instructions would have sent me into a spiral of resentment and anxiety. Now I felt almost detached, observing the scene like a director behind the camera. I could play the role they expected perfectly, and in doing so, I could control the narrative from the inside. The thought made a small, satisfied smile tug at my lips. Every cheerful, of course, and no problem at all that I uttered was a deliberate piece of my plan. I wasn't actually yielding to their control. I was setting the stage, laying the groundwork for the performance I intended to direct. I felt calm, collected, like a player in a game I had long since learned the rules to. The difference now was that I was playing to win, not to survive. I started thinking through the logistics immediately. I made a mental checklist, the perfect timing of my arrival, the way I would handle their instructions, even the small cues to subtly guide Kevin Vance's attention. I knew him as a sharp, non-nonsense investor who valued integrity, innovation, and precision. That knowledge gave me an advantage, while my parents were focused on appearances. I was already planning how to turn the evening into a situation where truth and competence would speak louder than rehearsed smiles and small talk. The idea was simple but effective. I would let them believe they were guiding the show, while I quietly maneuvered the pieces in my favor. I could see it clearly in my mind, their meticulous planning, their rehearsed lines, all built on the assumption that I was still the quiet, compliant daughter. They had no idea that the quiet, invisible girl they thought they knew had transformed into someone confident, strategic, and fully in control of her own story. The more I thought about it, the more the absurdity of the situation struck me. They were treating me as a means to an end, the same way they always had. But this time, I had power they couldn't comprehend. I could comply perfectly, appear helpful, even charming, and still be the one directing the outcome. It was almost poetic. Really, a small but satisfying twist of fate. I spent the next few days preparing, not just for the dinner itself, but for my own approach. I rehearsed my demeanor, visualized conversations, and mapped potential responses to their manipulations. Every step was calculated, every gesture intentional. I wasn't being petty or vengeful. I was ensuring that my parents' assumptions about me would work against them, that their own tactics would be dismantled quietly, effectively, and professionally. The amusement I felt grew with each planning session. I could almost hear their imagined dialogue instructions, expectations, small attempts to control the evening. And all the while, I was mentally scripting my role, the perfect balance of presence and subtle command. It was thrilling, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely untouchable in my own life. I wasn't reacting emotionally to their provocations or trying to earn approval. I was anticipating, strategizing, and preparing to use the situation as leverage for my own demonstration of independence and capability. Even while going through the motions, agreeing to help with appetizers, offering to arrive early, and acting the part of the daughter they wanted to see. I knew exactly where my real power lay. I was invisible only to those who chose not to see me. But this time, I wasn't invisible to the person who mattered most that night. Kevin Vance And that knowledge allowed me to move with confidence, amusement, and a calm sense of control. By the time the evening arrived, I was fully prepared. I had mapped out each interaction, every small decision, and the subtle ways I could redirect attention without confrontation. I was playing along on the surface, but beneath, I was conducting the orchestra, directing the performance with precision. My parents had no idea that the quiet, compliant daughter they thought they had invited was no longer just a background character. They were about to find out, in the most subtle and satisfying way, exactly who I had become. The night of the dinner arrived, and I stepped into my parents' house with a calm, controlled energy that I hadn't felt in years. I was wearing a simple, elegant sheath dress, nothing flashy, but expensive looking enough to suggest understated confidence. Mom, of course, immediately noticed and complimented me. "Oh, Hannah, you clean up so nicely," she said, her tone full of the kind of pride that masked her expectations. I smiled politely, nodding, letting her believe she had me right where she wanted. The preparation was, well, chaotic, but in a way that was familiar. I spent the first 2 hours in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, arranging a cheese platter, putting the finishing touches on a dessert Mom had bought from a fancy bakery she was planning to pass it off as her own. Naturally, Thea flitted in and out, complaining about Wi-Fi issues affecting her Instagram posts, completely absorbed in her own little world. Dad paced the living room, rehearsing market trends and portfolio diversification, completely unaware that his carefully honed script would crumble without me needing to lift a finger. And I was watching, observing, letting it all unfold while staying completely composed. Their attention was so focused on their own performance that they barely noticed me, issuing orders or seeking approval, completely oblivious to the fact that I was now operating on a different level. My calm contrasted sharply with their frantic energy, and I could almost see the tiny cracks forming in their polished facade. As I worked, I listened carefully. They spoke in reverent tones about Kevin Vance, his net worth, influence, the prestige he could bring. It was almost funny how seriously they were taking themselves, as if the entire evening depended on every word they rehearsed. And honestly, from where I stood, it kind of did, but for a completely different reason. This was the stage I had been planning for, the moment where their assumptions about me would be dismantled quietly, effectively. Around 7 p.m., I excused myself to freshen up. In the guest bathroom, I took a deep breath and sent a quick text. Kevin Vance's personal number was stored in my phone because he wasn't just a client, he was a trusted business partner. The text was simple. "Looking forward to seeing you tonight. Small world, isn't it, Hannah?" Almost immediately, my phone buzzed. His reply came with a hint of amusement. "Hannah, I had no idea. This just got a lot more interesting. See you soon." I smiled, feeling the tension in the room shift subtly in my favor. The stage was set, and now the guest of honor knew that there was an unannounced co-star. Returning to the kitchen, I maintained a small, composed smile. My parents, completely absorbed in their narrative, mistook it for contentment. A daughter finally pleased to be back in her place. They had no idea it was the smile of a director observing her own masterpiece about to unfold. The doorbell rang precisely at 7:30 p.m., and the air seemed to crackle with tension. Dad adjusted his tie for what had to be the 10th time. Mom smoothed her dress obsessively, and Thea flashed her practiced, dazzling smile. I stayed back, in my calculated position near the entrance to the dining room, exactly where a good supporting character should be. My heart was steady. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. Thea opened the door, revealing Kevin Vance himself, tall, distinguished, silvering hair, confident posture, and an air of intelligence that missed nothing. He greeted them politely, and I watched as my parents began their performance. Each word, each gesture carefully scripted. But I was observing, calculating, preparing to let the truth of my capabilities speak without me needing to intervene overtly. Kevin's eyes landed on me almost immediately, and I caught that brief flash of recognition, a spark that told me he remembered our past interactions, our professional respect. His polite smile returned quickly, but I could see the shift, that momentary acknowledgement that I was more than just the quiet daughter in the corner. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but to me, it was everything. Mom, of course, felt compelled to introduce me as if I were an afterthought. "And over there is our other daughter, Hannah," she said, using the same tone she'd once used to introduce me as the helper at their anniversary party years ago. Dad chuckled, a little too loudly, trying to mask his nervousness. "Hannah's our quiet one. She works with computers." I could see Kevin's expression change, a flicker of intrigue and recognition passing over his face. He immediately turned to me, and the warmth in his greeting was genuine, free of pretense. "Hannah," he said, with pleasure in his voice, "it's fantastic to see you. I had no idea this was your family." He extended a hand for a brief, friendly hug, the kind that conveys respect, trust, and genuine regard. I smiled back, calm and poised. "Kevin, it's good to see you too. Welcome." That simple interaction, the acknowledgement of my professional identity, sent subtle shockwaves through my parents. Their perfectly rehearsed lines, their careful staging, all suddenly seemed fragile and inadequate. They had assumed I would be background noise, invisible, compliant. Instead, I was the focal point of respect and attention from the one person whose opinion mattered most in the room. From that moment, everything shifted. Kevin engaged me in conversation, asking about my work, our projects, the growth of Innovate Solutions. He treated me not as a child or a decorative element in the family's performance, but as a peer, a CEO, someone whose expertise deserved recognition. Dad tried to redirect the conversation to himself, fumbling through stock market jargon and portfolio trends. But Kevin skillfully pivoted back to me, his questions thoughtful and precise. Mom's anxiety grew visibly. She kept shooting me, panicked, confused glances, like a conductor suddenly realizing her orchestra was out of her control. Thea, too, faltered, trying to interject with superficial chatter about brand collaborations. But Kevin's focused attention on me rendered her words irrelevant. The polished five-star meal they had prepared sat largely untouched, a silent witness to the unraveling of their performance. I remained calm, professional, and completely in control. I answered Kevin's questions thoughtfully, engaging in conversation as I would in any boardroom. I didn't need to gloat, didn't need to point out years of neglect or dismissive behavior. My success and the respect he showed me did all the work. Every nod, every smile, Every impressed comment he made was a quiet dismantling of the narrative my parents had built. They had tried to script the evening, to present a perfect family image, but I had subtly rewritten the script without them even realizing it. As the dinner progressed, the tension in the room became almost tangible. My parents, previously confident and composed, were reduced to strained, anxious figures. The rehearsed conversation topics failed against the reality of my professional competence and Kevin's recognition of it. The disparity was stark. I could feel the quiet thrill of control, the satisfaction of knowing that the respect and attention they had sought for themselves was directed entirely toward me, the one they had long underestimated. By dessert, it was clear who held authority in the room. Kevin, politely, professionally, acknowledged my achievements multiple times. Each acknowledgement was a subtle, undeniable truth that contrasted sharply with my parents' attempts at image management. I remained poised, composed, and cordial, letting the truth speak through my accomplishments and Kevin's respect. No confrontation was necessary. The power dynamics had shifted effortlessly, naturally. When Kevin excused himself, he turned to me with a warm, collegial tone. "Hannah, I'll have my assistant set up a call for next week." He smiled, a gesture of acknowledgement that carried weight beyond the simple logistics of scheduling. As I walked him to his car, he let out a low whistle, a laugh, and said, "Well, that was one of the most uncomfortable dinners of my life. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I replied, genuinely this time, and it felt true, more than it ever had at any of their rehearsed events. The acknowledgement, the respect, the validation it was real. Kevin, without knowing it, had helped me confirm what I already knew. I was in control of my own life, my own narrative, and my own achievements. Walking back inside, the facade of civility crumbled entirely. Mom's face was contorted with fury and humiliation. "What was that?" she hissed. Dad sputtered, confused and angry, realizing the script had collapsed. Thea was silent, stunned, her practiced composure gone. I simply stood there, calm, letting the truth, the respect Kevin had shown me, the recognition of my success resonate. It was a quiet but devastating dismantling of the world they had tried to impose on me. And in that moment, I felt an incredible sense of closure. I didn't need to shout, accuse, or demand acknowledgement. The truth had spoken for itself, and I had been the one in control, the one directing the outcome. My parents' power over me, built on years of compliance and manipulation, had no hold anymore. I had reclaimed my space, my identity, and my dignity all in a single evening, simply by being myself and letting the truth of my work and success do the talking. After the dinner, I walked back into the house one last time, and something in me shifted. The carefully constructed facade of civility had fallen away, and with it, the old roles I had been forced to play. I wasn't the invisible daughter, the dutiful helper, the background character in their lives anymore. I was just me, standing in my own power, calm, composed, and completely untethered from their expectations. The anger that had once simmered in my chest had transformed into a quiet, solid resolve. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was final. I looked around at their faces, Mom's fury, Dad's slack-jawed confusion, Thea's stunned silence, and I felt this overwhelming sense of closure. All the years of being minimized, overlooked, and used for their convenience. It didn't matter anymore. The respect and acknowledgement I had longed for wasn't coming from them, and it didn't need to. I had created it myself, through my work, my dedication, and my choices. And for the first time, I realized that was enough. I didn't wait for them to react, didn't give them a chance to argue or plead. I simply walked out of the house, leaving the remnants of their meticulously planned evening behind me. As I drove away, I didn't look back. The door closing behind me wasn't just a physical act, it was symbolic. The chapter of my life where I had been their servant, their invisible helper, had ended. A new chapter was beginning, one written entirely on my own terms, filled with opportunities and challenges that belonged to me alone. The sense of freedom was profound. I had stepped out of the shadows of their expectations, away from the constant pressure to perform for someone else's approval. I could breathe, think, and act without their influence pressing down on every decision. It was exhilarating, terrifying, and empowering all at once. For the first time in my life, I was the main character in my story. The choices, the victories, the failures, they were mine. And I had the power to navigate them however I wanted. Reflecting on the journey from invisibility to self-empowerment, I could see how every small act of resistance, every boundary I had set, had led me to this moment. Saying no, prioritizing my career, investing in myself, and building innovate solutions weren't just professional decisions. They were declarations of my value, my autonomy, and my right to live a life that mattered to me. Every line of code, every business deal, every strategic decision had been a step toward reclaiming myself, toward shedding the identity that had been imposed on me. And here I was, finally free from those constraints, carrying the knowledge that I didn't need validation from anyone who had consistently dismissed me. The closure wasn't about revenge or making them feel small. It was about me standing tall in the reality I had created. The invisible girl had disappeared, and in her place was someone fully seen, fully capable, and fully in control of her own life. If there's anything to take away from this story, it's that claiming your own space, setting boundaries, and pursuing your goals relentlessly can change everything. Sometimes the hardest decisions, the ones that feel scary or defiant, are the very ones that lead to the most profound freedom. So, if this resonates with you, consider it a little nudge to take charge of your own life too. And hey, if you've enjoyed this story, leave a comment or hit that like button. Maybe even subscribe. It's a way to share these moments of empowerment and bold choices with others who might need the reminder that they, too, can step into their own power. So, that's the story stepping out from the shadows and into my own life. Finally feeling the freedom and confidence I'd been building for years. It's been a journey of learning, asserting myself, and realizing my worth. I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had a moment where you had to stand up for yourself or take control of your path? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, consider liking or subscribing for more stories about empowerment and growth.